Hello, everyone. Thank you for hopping on this call on this lovely Wednesday morning, midday, afternoon, whatever time it is for you. My name is Allison Moe. I'm work with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We're going to give it maybe 2 minutes in case we have some people coming in late, and then we'll go ahead and get going. I'll say while we're waiting, if people who are on the call want to put their name and organization in the chat, just so we have a sense of everyone that is here, that would be great. We will have time for interaction and introductions and stuff a little bit later, partway through the presentation. But if you can put your name and your organization, maybe your state, in the chat, that would be great. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. There may be some people trickling in, but they can catch up. The first couple slides aren't super important. So thank you all for being here. Today we're going to be talking about tools and strategies for weatherization staff retention. So most of the people who are here in this room, in these rooms today, know that this is sort of a part 2 to a webinar that we did almost exactly a month ago with the same group of people here that we'll introduce in a second. But in January, we did a webinar that was about staff recruitment. And so this is about, once you get your staff in there, how do you keep them there, and what are good strategies to help you do that? This is part of a broader effort that is, if you want to go to the next slide, actually, Mary Beth, that this is an effort between a whole lot of partners that you're going to hear from today, NCAP, NASCASP, IREC, NREL, Service Year Alliance, who are all supporting the workforce efforts and needs of the Weatherization Assistance Program at sort of a national scale. So you're going to hear a lot of voices today. We're all trying to lend our expertise to support you all in keeping the staff that you have and keeping the staff that you are working to bring on right now. One more slide. Yep. So I'm going to just finish my little intro here by framing the sort of why we're here today. So for those who are on the January webinar, you saw a similar slide where I was talking about things that are kind of unique about this point in time in this economy with the federal funding that happens, and why everyone is facing some of the challenges that we're facing. So some of this information is from that slide from last time, which I was talking about. Younger workers, millennials, and Gen Z are really pushing change in the job market, which again, you can like or you can dislike, but it is a thing that is happening. So we want to make sure we acknowledge it. And some of this is a survey, some data here. You see that like cost of living and as a result, pay is often a top concern for younger workers. Half of workers surveyed in these age groups say that they live paycheck to paycheck, but also work-life balance is a top consideration when they are choosing an employer, right? So this feeds into some of the retention strategies that we're going to be talking about later. The second half of this slide down at the bottom, and this matches with the graphic up at the top, is from a survey of residential construction workers. So this is new construction, retrofit, so it's not all retrofit, it's not all weatherization. We don't have similar data for that, but it gives you a sense of, this was a survey about how engaged these workers are. So in this survey, 51% of workers surveyed said they were planning to stay in their job. 14% were disengaged, but not quite ready to leave, and 25% were thinking of leaving. So understanding that the issues, if you are facing issues of retention, that is also like not just you, although there are things that you can do, but it is something that is being seen across the board. And when you dug down further into these survey results, the people most likely to be thinking of leaving had less than 5 years of experience, were the newer workers, and the most frequently cited reasons were opportunities for career advancement, training, professional development, things like that. So those are all, again, this is the sort of framing why we're here and why we're going to talk about the things that we're talking about today. It's not just us making things up and telling them to you. It's definitely based in realities of the job market and what workers are saying. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mary Beth, and she is going to get us going today.
Thanks, Allison, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Good to be with you. Building off of what we talked about last time, we're gonna pick up with talking a little bit more about onboarding from the start, talk about communicating career pathways. We know that that is one of the strengths of the energy and weatherization fields. And if we go back to Allison's prior slide, we saw where career pathways were a major motivator for why people were leaving jobs. So this is an area where weatherization really has a strength that can be leveraged to help keep people engaged. We're also going to talk about that organizational culture and some of the ways that culture can support retention. We all want to work for a workplace where we feel valued and safe. And so or talk about that connection with org culture. And then we're going to wrap up with talking a little bit about how we plan for change, because change is inevitable. The people around the table, the people who work at our organizations will change with time. But before we do that, we do want to take a moment to ground ourselves in the promise of community action. And so community action, it changes people's lives, it embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and it makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And so, this promise really drives the work that we do here at NCAP and that local community action agencies do all over the country. And weatherization is absolutely an essential piece of fulfilling this promise. As we discussed last time, this is a review of high-level best-in-class practices, but it's not meant to just be like us talking. We hope to create some space and some containers and opportunity for peer discussion and sharing. We will have some breakout rooms. We have some time here in the big group to talk as well. And I just want to name at the top that there are some nuances to these conversations, that there are different challenges and opportunities in our respective roles. Some of you are here with states, some of you are here with local agencies, and where we sit might impact how we approach some of this work. And we should just take a moment to kind of center and be empathetic to the different positions that we all sit in. We all share a common goal. We share that promise of creating change. Just how we accomplish it might look a little bit different, which is a really nice segue to this point that when we're talking about some of these best-in-class practices, they take a lot of time and effort, and how they're applied in different agencies, in different organizational cultures may need to look different. And so, when we're talking about some of this, think about how it could look for your organization, or if you're a state, how you can support organizations to assess if this practice even fits within their model. So the last time that we chatted, we looked at the employee life cycle. None of these pieces happen independently. None of us have an etch-a-sketch brain, as much as sometimes I wish I did, that, once you're on board with the organization, you just forget your whole hiring experience. How we start this employee life cycle will absolutely influence how we retain, develop, and offboard staff as well. So in our first part of the session, or in the first webinar, we really kind of covered attraction, recruitment. We started to talk about onboarding, and now today we're gonna start talking through how we retain, how we develop, and how we support people in offboarding from the organization. So with this idea of onboarding from the start, one of the things that we heard from all of you on the call was some of the challenges around ghosting, that you find the great person through some miracle, and then they don't show up to their first day of work. And back to that cycle, onboarding really begins from the moment that you decide to make a hire. Because if people feel connected to your organization, if they feel like they are being welcomed in, like they're an integral part of the organization from the get-go, they are less likely to ghost you. Not that 100% of the time that works, life happens, but you know, thinking about your entire process in an intentional way for how it sets people up um, engage with your organization will serve you well. And so that time in between, when you make the decision to hire somebody, you make the offer, you know, usually people can't start for a few weeks. Sometimes they can't start for a month. And so that time is a really dangerous time. It's, uh, you know, the person that you hired might be taking other job interviews, right? In the meantime, your job probably isn't the only job that they applied for. They might be getting other offers in that time. So it's really important in that time in between that you are starting to engage with the employee and that you are creating a connection with them in that time. So some of the strategies that you can use for that time in between are sending a welcome packet that includes, you know, some of like the required paperwork. But I got to tell you, that stuff isn't compelling. It doesn't make me want to work for your organization because I filled out, you know, my W-2, my W-9, whichever one it is. But you know, not just that, but maybe you have like employee profiles, or maybe you do Strengths Finder, or you know, maybe you ask people, you know, when is their birthday? How do they like to be recognized? How do they like to celebrate? You know, engaging people from the get-go will kind of help them to begin to see themselves as a part of your organization. Set up some time to check in before that first day as well. While ghosting is always painful, it's better to know a week out before their start date that they're not going to start than it is the first day. So, you know, set up a time to say, let's just touch base the Friday before you start, make sure you have everything you need, you know where you're going, all that kind of good stuff, just so that you have those touch points with the candidate. So here's a part where we would love to hear more from you about what else has worked for you, what's worked for you in terms of onboarding and engaging folks from the get-go. You are welcome to take yourself off mute. I know folks also may prefer to work in the chat. And if that's the case, that's fine. I'm going to pass to Allison, though, in the meantime, to talk a little bit about one example from the WAP network while you're thinking about how you might have engaged folks from the get-go. So, Allison?
Yeah, thanks, Mary Beth. So this story comes from the Weatherization Successes and Solutions page, which is a new DOE web page that's linked at the bottom. You'll all have these slides sent to you later this week or maybe early next week, and so you'll be able to access it there. But this is from Energy Resource Center in Colorado, and so this story was published first maybe a year ago. So maybe 2 years ago, they sort of redid their onboarding policies and procedures to make sure that every staff that came on board had the same experience, right? And that they were thinking holistically about that person's first day, first week, first month, first 90 days, really. So, you know, everyone got a complete tour of everything, not only like their office, but their warehouse facilities. And sometimes they would see a job site, depending on what their position was and if that was relevant. They would have a sit-down discussion with their manager about the organization and the mission and the career, you know, what does their career ladder potential look like? What are the opportunities for training and things like that, professional development? They got branded swag. They said that was sort of a nice thing on someone's first day, if you get, you know, like a sweatshirt and a mug or whatever that is, t-shirts and hats. They also, and this is something I've seen at other organizations and I've experienced, and it's been really helpful, they would assign a staff person to be sort of like a peer mentor or something to every new person. And this was a staff person that wasn't their direct supervisor or wasn't necessarily even in their own their own department or division. And that was somebody who was like basically assigned to check in with them like once a month for the first 3 months that they were there, have coffee, have breakfast, whatever that looks like. But it was a chance for somebody to be able to know that there's someone else they can reach out to. They can ask organizational questions, whether if they may not be comfortable doing that of a person who was working within their group. But again, trying to help them get to know people in other parts of the organization and feel a bit more connected. So that's a great example. I'm sure there are many other examples. This is the one that we have that we can be publicly sharing. But yeah, I don't know. Let's check the chat to see if anyone put anything in here. Brent says you've seen that swag can go a long way towards retention, which seems funny, but I wear swag from jobs that I don't even work at anymore for sure, and I wear it proudly. Well, you can always add things to the chat as we go, but we would love to share best practices to the extent that we can. Do you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, Mary Beth? So this was sort of mentioned in that example before about communicating career pathways. And so we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about this from a few different angles. So sometimes career pathway is like thrown out there and it makes a lot of sense once you know what it is, but it may not sort of make sense to you up front. So for some, this is not necessarily the case for every worker, but for some workers, it can help them feel more engaged if they know from day one, from the start, what the opportunities are for them to grow in their skills and sort of their knowledge and capabilities, in their responsibilities, and then in their wages. So what a streamlined career pathway is, which is what you're sort of going for, is a clear sequence of employer-validated education, credentials, and experience that allow workers to get their employment, advance in their jobs with progressively more responsibility and fair compensation. So this is sort of like a cookie cutter definition, but if you go to the next slide here, this is just a graphic and it takes a little minute to like bring it all in, but you're basically, if that blue arrow in the center is the pathway that your worker is going down and they want to see eventually career advancement, growth in wages, employment stability, right? Which is employment stability is good for employers and not just for workers, right? But there's a lot of things that go into that and sort of wrap around to support these workers. So there's the sort of educational experience, which in the weatherization world can mean, the required training that they receive and the certifications that they can get as a result of that. You also have just the on-the-job experience that they're receiving. And then in addition to that, they may be getting support from, their own support system that they have, their family, their friends, things like that. And then you may have, funding partners. There are different partners that sort of help all of this happen in real time. But this to me is a helpful graphic to understand everything that goes into making that as streamlined and consistent as possible. The next slide, I'm going to actually hand over to Pagan from IREC. And Pagan, if you want to do a quick introduction of yourself before you launch into this, but this is another way to visualize and share potentially with employees to be able to talk about career pathways.
Hello, everyone. For those of you that I don't know, I'm Pagan Pajoni. I'm the Director of Strategic Workforce Engagement at the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. And we have led the development of the Green Buildings Career Map that many of you are familiar with. And if not, check out greenbuildingscareermap.org. It's a great way to explore different career pathways. But my specific update right now is we have added 2 new pieces to the Green Buildings Career Map. At the top, where the top red arrow is pointing to weatherization, is a new section on the career maps that kind of describes the weatherization assistance program specifically, and then directs folks to learn more at Green Workforce Connect. greenworkforceconnect.org is an initiative related to raising awareness of career opportunities and pathways in the weatherization assistance program. And then on the second red arrow points to a tab called the Weatherization Assistance Program. And from that tab on the career map at the bottom, you can click on the weatherization job role. So if you click on building performance installer, you can see different career pathway options for employees that have that skill set, whether that's staying in the weatherization assistance program and perhaps becoming a building performance crew leader. But there's also other pathways that you can show that are outside of the weatherization assistance program. And then the same going up the ladder, you can click on building performance crew leader and get to pathways, energy auditor, and QCI and beyond. And I think I'm going to pass it over to Kai.
That's correct. Hello, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I am Kai Garvin, the Weatherization Workforce Program Manager here at NASCASP. And along with the other resources that you've just seen, NASCASP has recently released a career path toolkit. This toolkit's meant to um, be the foundation for creating your own career path internally. It is fully customizable, it's editable, there's lots of different options to use. There are detailed instructions, examples with different job descriptions and things like that. Uh, it's meant to really help visualize that career path in weatherization. Like Allison spoke to, we have a pretty good opportunity to easily create these career paths in weatherization with the um, the four core positions. We have a simple setup there, plus all the training planning and different things that we do. Um, it's pretty easy to take what you have existing and turn it into something that's a little more visually appealing for workers. If you'll go to the next slide. Oh, no, we can talk about it later. There will be examples. These two slides are just examples here. So this is a normal salary schedule that I'm sure a lot of you have seen with grades and steps and just kind of a spreadsheet full of numbers. This is what a lot of organizations use to showcase or highlight their career paths and say, hey, you can get a raise at step 3 or etc. A lot of times these are based on merit or experience, and they're not as fully inclusive to show the actual advancement opportunities that can happen within weatherization. Go ahead to the next slide. Using the toolkit, it takes some work. Like I said, it does lay the foundation, but you can use all the existing information you have, whether it's a salary schedule, a simple Word document with a training plan or something like that. You can use this toolkit to create not only a visual career path, there's different options. You can use Excel like seen here. It's a little boxy and not as pretty. There's also a Visio option if you have access to Visio that has a little flow chart that looks a lot nicer. But you can use your existing information, salary schedules, training plans, other accomplishments such as merit or some professional development, things like that, to create these toolkits, and it'll give your workers or new job seekers, new employees, things like that, a better idea of what they need to do to advance, and kind of guide them, what's needed for your organization also. And I think with that, I'll pass it off to Allison.
Thanks, Kai. And I just wanted to highlight that Kai is going to be, NASCAS is going to be hosting a webinar to deep dive, it looked like, deeper into that. So if that's a tool that you're interested in looking at and learning more about, maybe you can put that in the chat, Kai, that information. But the last thing, and this is just going to be a real quick touch on this, because I don't, looking at the list of participants, I don't know that anyone on this call is specifically looking at developing apprenticeship programs, but apprenticeship is a system that's been around for a long time, that's really good at this career pathway thing. It's foundational to sort of how apprenticeships work. And so it's definitely not something that has been used a lot in the residential sort of construction world, and definitely not in the retrofit and weatherization world a lot, but it's growing. Interest is growing for a lot of different reasons right now. There are 2 examples right now in the Weatherization Assistance Program of agencies using apprenticeships to help recruit and retain workers, and there are several agencies that are sort of in the process of registering an apprenticeship. So I just want to put it out there. Even if you don't know that apprenticeship is right for you, there is a lot that can be learned from the processes that put this in place. So there's tools like Kai was describing, that we're trying to provide to everyone. So no matter what, you can provide sort of a consistent career pathway discussion and have a tool to help with that discussion with new hires. But apprenticeship is just a different approach to doing the same thing, right? If you think about like an electrical apprentice, for example, they know exactly, if I do this thing, year 1, year 2, and I take this class and I do this thing, I will get this exact raise in pay. And it's consistent and predictable for the worker, which it helps keep them, even if they're starting out at a lower pay, way. They know if I do all these things in 5 years, I'll be a journeyman and I can, and this is what I can do. It's also helpful, right? It works in sort of like the labor union sense, because everyone knows what a year to apprentice knows. For the most part, it's pretty consistent anywhere you go in the country, but for sure anywhere within your state. So there's consistency for employers, but also consistency for the workers. So anyway, I will say that on March 7th, I know we're throwing a lot of things at you, but we're going to be, well, IREC is sort of spearheading the process for helping people to register an apprenticeship, and NREL is supporting that effort by creating some resources specific to the Weatherization Assistance Program. So if you want to learn more about that, there is also going to be a thing on March 7th. I can also drop that in the chat. We're throwing a lot of things at you. But if you're interested in learning more, there will be technical assistance and there will be some resources coming out specific to weatherization. And I think it's back to Mary Beth.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks, friends. Would love to know if folks have utilized communicating a clear career pathway in their organizations and how that's worked for them. Feel free, put it in the chat, come off mute at any time. Any questions y'all have, or thoughts or questions for each other, please throw in here. We're going to keep moving ahead, but as I said, feel free to add wherever. We want to talk a little bit about organizational culture and how that impacts worker retention. And so, you always hear that term, org culture, right? And organizational culture is one of those things that can be really hard to define at a broad level. But here's the thing, is that you have an organizational culture whether or not you're thinking intentionally about it. And essentially what an organizational culture is it's the personality of your organization, and it influences the way that you do everything in your organization, from how you engage with your employees to the ultimate performance of your organization. And another way I think about organizational culture is that it's the context in which we operate, and it's ultimately it's connected to every single thing that we do. And so often we focus on outcomes, right? We think about how are we creating change for people? How are we actually retaining staff, right? Like those would be tangible outcomes. But in the case if we were an apple tree, right, and apples were our outcomes, really the soil is our culture, right? It influences, if the soil is not good, you're not going to have strong produce, right? And so it's the same idea with culture, that if we don't have a strong culture where people feel supported and welcomed and engaged, we're less likely to have good employee um, outcomes, right? And here's the other piece of that, though, is that culture is not just something that is around us. We can create and shape our culture, and we create our culture together in the moment. And we all are a part of the culture. We all own it, and we all can build it. We can perpetuate it, or we can recreate it as we see necessary. And so, it's really important to see that not that you see yourself separate as the culture from the organizational culture, but as a piece of the organizational culture, that you have control to change what that organizational culture looks like. And so, the term culture really refers to the attitudes and patterns of behavior in a given group. And it's important to recognize that organizational culture does not exist in a vacuum, right? Your organizations are made up of individuals who have their own cultures that they bring with themselves to work. That culture, that individual culture, might be a little bit different, though, than kind of the professional way that we show up in our work. Certainly if you've been to some conferences, you might notice that there are different cultures in different segments of our network, right? That the weatherization culture might look a little bit different than the early childhood culture, and it might look a little bit different than kind of the data people culture, right? And so it's important to know and recognize that there are different levels of the culture, and that our organizations also exist within a local state, a community, and that culture, kind of the context in which our organizations operate, all of that influences our organization's way of being. It influences our context, right? And so, much like an iceberg, there are some things that are very obvious to us, right? There are some very tangible things when it comes to culture that we can point to, in in an individual level, or kind of a um, like a community level. You might see food and music and language and the way we talk about things. Those are all pretty tangible, but really there's a lot underneath the water that again influences these tangible things up here, whether or not we talk about them. Things like expectations, norms, etiquette, perceptions, our thought processes. All of those things ultimately influence our organization. So great, we're talking about this really big amorphous thing, right? So how in the heck do we how do we create a culture or context where people feel supported and want to engage and stay with the organization? Um, uh, so we're going to go through a few ways quickly that you can build a strong organizational culture and support a strong organizational culture. One of the biggest things is to center purpose and deeply understand your why. Um, People feel compelled when they understand in work, they feel compelled when they understand how their job connects to the organization's purpose. And so helping people to understand those connections is essential. Working on strengthening the alignment of that shared vision and values for the organization, so that you can assure that everyone from the board to leaders to staff to volunteers all know and understand, where we're trying to go collectively and how we go about doing it, right? Like, what are the things that we value in our approach? And so a quick values exercise that I like to do, and I would love if you would participate in this with me, is take a moment and reflect on what it looks like for your organization to do its most impactful work, to do its best work or its most impactful work. So I want you to envision that. And if you would, put into the chat 2 or 3 words that you would use to describe when your organization does its best work. What does it look like when your organization does its best work? The National Community Action Partnership is a membership association. And so when I think about when we do our best work, it is customer centered, right? It is based on what the organizations that we support need. I see Brent said team, engaged, connected, service. Yeah, so we're not, we're doing this together, collaboration, right? And so what's interesting, keep them coming, guys. When you do this in your organization, you could do this exercise with your team to say, what does it look like for us to do our best work? Ask everyone to come up with 3 or 4 adjectives. Hive mind thinking, okay, when my work is human-centered, inclusive, and intentional. So you can do this with your teams. And what you'll find is that there will be some alignment around some of the terms. And this is a quick way to kind of uncover, what do we value as an organization, right? And what is important to us, and how do we define, when we're our best selves? And then you could take that a step further. So Christina put in the chat, client-centered. So if that's a value of ours, how do we leverage that in our work, right? How do we take that idea of being client-centered and then have it show up in the practices that we use every single day? And so that might be, that we assess customers based, we get their inputs on where they want to go, what their goals are, versus the organization's kind of prescribing that. one of the values sometimes we hear about is transparency. And so when you think about how could our organization embody transparency in the way that we do our work, you can think about application processes. How do we ensure transparency in decision making? But getting clear on these values is one of the ways that you can get really clear on what's important to the organization. And then you can connect this to, you can look to the Community Action Code of Ethics for some guidance. And then when it comes to that shared vision, values, and beliefs, promoting inclusivity and belonging is essential, right? Again, take a minute and think about a time where you felt like you belonged, right? Think about that time that you felt like you belonged. Think about how that could support an organizational culture, right? If people feel like they belong in your organization, they are more likely to stay and continue to show up. So how could you foster a sense of belonging amongst your team? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about our different models to support that. So I've already talked about this, that getting clear on our why, on our purpose, is one of the ways to drive engagement. Your what is not as compelling as your why. Doing weatherization is not as compelling as why do you do weatherization? What's the goal? What's the purpose you're trying to achieve? And centering that, starting with your vision for what would happen if you were successful, then your values and the philosophies that you have really guide the way that you do your work, and then the strategy for how you make it happen, right? Because it's not just weatherization for weatherization's sake, it's weatherization to support people to achieve economic security or to improve housing stock. And so getting clear on that why and helping people see how their jobs connect back to that why is a really compelling thing to do to help people feel supported and engaged. So often in community action agencies, in the past, what we saw was kind of a grants management business model, though, like where we looked at our different programs kind of in silos. Head Start had specific services that drove specific outcomes, and community services had services that drove outcomes. And so this might look pretty familiar to you. But this is the community action impact model. Is not just about program outcomes, but about thinking about the broader outcomes that we have for people, for communities and agencies, that then are driven by different strategies that are supported by different programs. And so rather than seeing weatherization as just, a program that has services and outcomes, it is so much more compelling to say weatherization is one of the strategies that we use to help families and communities achieve broader outcomes that drive us towards that agency vision and purpose. Connecting people to the why makes all the difference. Leadership is a big facet of this. You don't have to be a quote unquote manager. You don't have to supervise people to be a leader. It's a practice. It's not a position. And, leadership, I love this quote, leadership is accepting responsibility for enabling others to achieve shared purpose in the face of uncertainty, which is what we so need in this time. And so when it comes to maintaining a healthy organizational culture too, we have to think about how work gets done, right? So, how can you support accountability broadly across your organization, have clear roles, give people autonomy to make decisions where they can, and have appraisals of how things are going and continuous feedback. Feedback is a key piece of retention, right? People want to know how they're doing and how they can improve. And then also thinking about your organization's infrastructure. Sometimes I hear folks really focused on kind of the worker's experience, and saying, we really want that to be good. And then, gosh, have you ever suffered through a terrible timekeeping software, or the software that you have to use for HR or whatever it may be? Every decision that we make, all of our processes ultimately can help or hinder our culture. So making sure that our processes are modern, efficient, and effective, that we have compassionate systems and processes and policies that are really kind of worker centered. Communication is a big piece of this. I don't have to tell you all that. It has to be two-way, it has to be honest, and it has to be transparent. And this can really help to foster psychological safety and trust amongst your teams. And all of this gets into how we can encourage ultimately people's well-being, right? Because when we don't just employees aren't just employees, they're people, right? And so how do we help employees to be their best selves and be well? Because when they are well outside of work, they're going to be even better inside of work. So, we talked through some of this last time about compensation. We just started to talk about talent development and learning and those career pathways. We talked about creating a sense of meaning. We also have to have ways that we reward and recognize awesome achievements, that we support people to, have some autonomy in their decision making and in their job, right? No one likes to be micromanaged, right? That we have shared power and feedback and fun and joy. These jobs are tough, y'all. So how can we create space for fun and joy amongst our teams? And so we do have some examples from the Weatherization network. So would welcome, folks on the call, share what you've learned about building a strong organizational culture. What of these practices really resonate with you? But Allison, do you want to talk through this example from Northwest Colorado Council of Governments in the meantime?
Yeah, so we try to sprinkle real world examples throughout. I am sure that the sorts of things Mary Beth has described are happening at a lot of agencies, and we just don't always know about all of them. So this is an example we do know about that was shared at a workshop from a couple of years ago. But Northwest Colorado Council of Governments was a weatherization agency. They were seeing a lot of turnover, and they knew that there was just not a great they did not have a great culture. And they didn't quite know how to fix it. And so there was a point in their sort of turnover cycle where there was like enough new blood in the agency that they decided to just make a concerted effort to do a total overhaul, focused on organizational culture. And so it looked like a lot of things. So there was some consistency in onboarding that was done. There was some training and some focus on DEI stuff, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But they did things like they offered a variety of ways that staff could provide feedback on a regular basis on how like what's your job like, what are barriers, things like that. And again, it could be it was both anonymous, or people could give their own information if they were concerned about anonymity. But this is something that's sort of unique, which is why we're calling them out. This is not what you have to do, but this is a sort of very unique example of trying to make people feel valued. But they were also having some just financial difficulty in serving families, and they decided to create a for-profit branch to serve higher income households with their weatherization services. And so through that effort, they created basically like a profit sharing. So any profits at the end of the year from that fee-for-service new offering that they had, they just divided it equally amongst every employee. It didn't matter if you were the executive director, or if you were the admin person, or if you were, an entry-level installer, whatever that was. Everyone got, and it might not be very much, right? In some years it was like $50, and in some years it was a few $100s, and it sort of depended. But it was a way for everyone to feel like they were valued equally across the agency. It was an incentive for them to be more engaged in improving the services that they offered. So not saying that you all have to suddenly do cost sharing or profit sharing or something like that, but recognizing that there are things you can do that can make your staff feel valued, feel heard, feel like they are a part of the process. And it totally changed their recruitment and their retention. They had staff that suddenly started, finding people to, doing referrals when they were hiring. They would be like telling their friends and telling their family members, hey, this is a great place to work. So it is something that can absolutely change what things feel like and look like and are experienced in your agency. But after that example, I'm going to hand it back over to Brent. Are you next?
I am next. Thanks, Allison.
Okay. And Brent's going to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility.
That's it. So yeah, Brent Kostick, Director of Programs at Service Year Alliance. In summary, I'm part of the IREX Weatherization Assistance Program, Energy and Enhancement and Innovation Project. Also work with Allison at NREL on a few different projects as well. But yeah, happy to share some additional resources and tools to also support diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility within your organization. I think one of the first things worth mentioning is just about all topics that we've discussed to date, and then also the rest of the presentation today will go a long way towards promoting a culture of belonging and inclusion at your organization. The one thing to think about with that is that just like all other things that are worth doing, your organization must be willing to devote the time and effort to building an organizational culture that will lead to strong retention rates amongst individuals with a diverse array of backgrounds. And so really what you need to do is make sure that in order to be successful, your DEIA initiatives need to go beyond just that recruitment and outreach portion, and make sure that you're supporting your employees once they're actually on the ground with you at your organization. Can we go to the next slide? So one of the most important things to keep in mind is that each agency's culture is unique, and therefore you're first going to need to spend a little bit of a time identifying what components of your work environment to be prioritized in order to further grow or support your DEIA goals and initiatives. So that, just like we've talked about with Mary Beth's part of the presentation, that could be everything from providing more training to your field staff supervisors, to even looking at your benefits package, right? And so here we've plugged in a few different tools that will help your organization first kind of look at where you might want to devote time and effort, and then also some tools that can allow you to actually put an action plan in place. So Jobs for the Future's Quality Job Framework is a great way to start. It kind of outlines the different areas of organizational culture, so you can kind of define where you think you should lean into. We've also plugged in a sample racial equity action plan that is a great example of, once you have your goals, what is the action you're going to take? What's the timeline, responsibilities to actually securing your goal? Some other great resources in this space is Department of Energy's Better Buildings Workforce Accelerator document, and then also IREX key recommendations for cultivating a diverse and skilled talent pipeline for our equitable transition as well. One of the biggest things that we wanted to elevate is that as you are looking at, leaning into special places to support diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of the most important things about all that is making sure that you're keeping in mind that you need to center the voice of the individuals who are closest to any of the policies, practices, programs, or initiatives that you might be putting forward or changing. So that can look a variety of different ways, but just making sure it's not just your leadership team or your management staff that are making these decisions. Make sure that you're bringing in field staff, even clients of your WAP programming, other community partners. And with that, I want to pass it back over to Pagan to show a little bit about how that showed up at the WAP E&I project.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we incorporated into this project was an advisory group that really was that group of stakeholders that broadly represented the types of people that we're trying to increase awareness of weatherization careers and contracting opportunities with. And absolutely, I agree, by incorporating diverse voices, we really create solutions that are more robust and inclusive and better reflect the communities that we're trying to serve. And it doesn't matter if it's an internal policy or practice that you're working on, or a project or program initiative. When we include and foster diverse representation, we get increase the sense of belonging and empowerment. When people see themselves reflected in the decision-making process, they're more invested in the outcomes, which leads to greater trust and buy-in and a shared sense of ownership. and all of that definitely supports retention of employees. But I think it starts in our previous webinars and continues through what we've talked about here, and then goes into kind of just general organizational culture and supporting diverse voices at the table when decisions are being made. I think we are going to Mary Beth now.
Thanks, Pagan and Brent. And picking up on that point about centering different voices within our agencies, I wanted to share with you the Surgeon General's framework for workplace mental health and well-being. I love this framework as a really nice way to think intentionally about what workers need to be well. And the first thing I want to call your attention to is that all of this has to be centered on worker voice and equity. And that's how these ideas or ideals are approached by your organization and by different people. Like different people are going to have different perceptions of what it means to be safe at work and be protected from harm or be connected and part of a larger community. And so this framework, if you go to the Surgeon General's website, goes through each one of these components that they have found to be essential to workplace well-being. And then they dive into like these deeper subtopics and then give you great tools and resources and learning about how you can support workers' protection from harm, how you can help foster connection and community in the workplace, how you can help folks to have a work-life harmony, how you can help folks to have that mattering at work piece, connecting back to purpose, understanding their meaning and respecting their dignity as people and as employees, and then creating that opportunity for growth. This is a really fabulous resource, so I hope that you will check it out. And the website's really pretty, I'll say that too. One of the great tools that was in the Surgeon General's framework are some different reflection questions. These reflection questions give you an opportunity as an organization to sit back and think intentionally about some of those different areas that I just shared with you. And so we did plan to do a breakout group here. However, because we are actually a smaller group, we wanted to take some time we're just going to stay here in the main room. I would love if folks would be willing to join me on camera, to come off mute, and maybe we could just discuss a few of these questions and how it looks in our different organizations. And I mean, maybe we could start y'all with that first question about how does our workplace prioritize DEIA policies and initiatives, and do workers recognize it as an organizational priority? So I'm curious, amongst folks on the call, agencies, everyone here, is anyone willing to share how their organization prioritizes policies, DEIA policies and initiatives, and if workers are seeing it as a priority? Who will be brave and share first?
Sorry, I'm muted. I wonder, Mary Beth, it might be helpful to just have everyone, since we have a little bit of time, introduce themselves, the non-speakers, because we're sort of split evenly, pretty 50-50. But it might just, if everyone can just say a quick, my name is, my organization is, and then pick maybe, I don't know, we can either pick one of these questions and answer it, or however we want to do it. But I want to make sure we all know who all is here. Would that be okay with you?
Please.
Okay.
I'm Chris Small. I'm a senior associate with Workforce Development, and day 3 of my new position here at NCAP.
Thanks, Chris. Do you have any thoughts on any of these questions? It might be too new for you at NCAP, but if you have, like from previous examples, either really good examples or really poor examples of any of these things?
I would be delighted to talk about Group 3, the mentorship piece. That's always been near and dear to my heart operationally. And I would be happy to facilitate a discussion on the mentorship piece.
Okay, I'm just going to go in order here. Kenyatta, you're next on my screen. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, my name's Kenyatta Walker. I'm the Assistant Director for Home Repair as part of our weatherization team here at Wayne Metro.
Thank you. Next on my list is Christina Brownell. Said that wrong.
Hi, I'm Christina Brownell, and I'm with Community Action Region 6 in Jamestown, North Dakota. And I'm the executive director here and have been for just at 3 years since I've taken over that role. And we have been very fortunate in our weatherization program to not have much turnover until this last year. So we're a little bit new to the heartache that I know so many people have been experiencing for quite a while. And as far as the questions are concerned, the number 2, workers understand the mission and how their work contributes. That is something that I have been trying to get our staff more aware of since I took over. And I do that by sharing different emails to everybody that has like our mission on it, highlighting different things, especially like this year with the 60th anniversary. I've been trying to make sure that I share all that information with them to try to get them to understand better.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sort of like going off script so people can like use the hook at any point here, but do any weatherization agency that's within like a community action agency, do you have like a single mission at every agency, or does every community action agency have their own mission, or can a weatherization program within a community action agency have its own mission statement? I'm just curious, I'm curious how consistent it is or how much room for making it unique to the organization. Any thoughts there?
We have one. We don't have it by department or program.
Do you have like departmental goals, or I don't know. I was recently talking with someone about like often people in the weatherization network know how to talk about weatherization, but they don't always have like you have your elevator pitch or your mission statement, but don't always have it for the jobs component. And I just think that's like having every staff person be able to like say in 30 seconds or less what your organization does in a succinct way is probably really valuable. And I'm just, so anyway, that was helpful, Christina, because I was just curious if like, does everyone have the same one? Or I would be curious for other people, but I'm getting off topic and I want everyone to introduce themselves. Okay, next we've got Arnitra.
Hi, I'm Anitra Cooksey. I'm the Weatherization Assistant Director over the Compliance and Budget at Wayne Metro.
Thank you, Arnitra. Destiny.
Hello, I'm Destiny Morrell. I am the Workforce and Community Liaison for the Oklahoma Department of Commerce. And so I help our subgrantees with problems with workforce. So I help them with recruiting or retention, so stuff like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Destiny. Mary.
I'm with the Wisconsin Division of Energy, Housing, and Community Resources, and I'm the lead weatherization policy analyst. We internally work with our weatherization operators, and we have a work group related to workforce development. So we're I guess, trying to identify ways that we might be able to aid the agencies in this. I mean, we don't hire the people, but it's sometimes I question the culture at some of the agencies. So how we can change those things. And I guess as I look at the diversity, equity, inclusion, I think a lot of people just think of it as a oh, I'm of this heritage, I'm this color. It's so much more than that. It's our lived experiences all bring a diverse perspective to our jobs. So I guess I would encourage people to think broader than just the standard, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because I think it seems limiting, and while it's important, it's not the only thing to diversity.
Thank you, Mary. We're getting a few more people who are hopping on right now. Mark, you're next on my list if you want to say a quick hello.
Hey, I'm having some technical difficulties, so hence the voice only chat. But I work at COAD. I'm a special programs coordinator. I'm fairly new to the position, so I don't quite know what qualifies as special. So we're going to find out, but I was just here to check in. Sorry I'm late. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Erin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Erin Pavlich. I'm in the Human Resources Division at Oakland Livingston Human Service Agency, which has a weatherization program. I'm not sure what other information are you looking for?
Oh, we were just sort of doing introductions, and we kind of I got us off topic, so I will apologize for that. But are you okay, Mary Beth, if we just keep having at this point having everyone say hi, and then we can come back to the questions?
Sounds good.
Okay. Let's see. Susan, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh, Susan is connecting to audio. Oh, are you there, Susan? She may not be. Andrea, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, I was like, I think my internet just froze. Hello, everybody. Andrea Olson. I'm the executive director of the Community Action Association in North Dakota, and it is -6 degrees outside.
Oh.
It was 60 degrees 2 days ago. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
More on that later.
Great. Well, we just had a number of people who just hopped on, and so we're an hour into our hour-and-a-half webinar, so hopefully we'll send out these slides so that you can get caught up. But right now we're talking about reflection questions about supporting organizational culture, which is part of the retention. So Mary Beth, I totally like sideswiped your thing, but do you want to bring us back and decide a way that we can work through these questions?
Yeah, so originally, we had planned for some breakout rooms, but I think just given the size of our attendance, we'll stay here in the main room. I heard some interest in talking about question 2, and I heard some interest in talking about question 3. So can folks give me a thumbs up? Do folks have the ability to do thumbs up? Reactions, maybe not. Put in the chat if you want to talk about question 2 or question 3. Let's start there. Let's pick one question. And if it's evenly divided, we'll flip a coin. Okay, great. Already evenly divided. Perfect. Oh, good. Okay, cool. All right. So how about let's start with question 2. Let's start there. So does every worker understand our organization's mission and how their work contributes to achieving it? So Christina, you had started sharing a little bit about, how you share out the mission, via email. And I'm wondering if folks have other thoughts. How are you helping workers to connect to the mission and how their work contributes to it? Who else is willing to share? Yeah, Brett.
So I think our organization is very structured about it, which has been helpful, at least for me, who has a newer staff at our organization. So we kind of take our mission each year we divide that into organizational goals and then reflect on that to make sure those goals align with that greater mission. Once we get to that point, then it goes into department or individual goals that feed into these annual goals that have been developed. And I think what has really been helpful about that is it allows us throughout the year, as new opportunities or projects or whatnot comes up, we kind of use that same way as a way to like really say, should we say yes to this project or initiative or no? And we can kind of reflect back on making sure that it goes to our greater mission or, you know, our annual goals or work plans, things like that.
Always love hearing mission as a decision filter. It's like one of my favorite things in the world. I see a couple more folks came off mute. And then because I said that, everyone said, oh, not me. So I'll share, you know, one of the things we hear agencies doing is sometimes there's intentional work in this around in strategic planning, because your strategic plan actualizes your mission. And so a really cool practice I heard from an agency was they went through a really intentional process of strategic planning, and then they sent it out to the staff and they said, how do you see your work contributing to the strategic plan? Rather than kind of prescribing to folks, like, here's how your job is going to roll up, but really try to facilitate some, centering worker voice and leadership in creating that plan. What else? All right, how about if we move to question 3? I'm not hearing a whole lot on question 2. How about if we move to question 3? What does mentorship look like in our workplace? How could it be improved? Who will kick us off?
I'll kick us off. Mentorship, you just mentioned such a great thing about how do I enhance or implement the strategic plan, but the mentorship piece takes that to how do we together take that and work together. Mentorship components are wide and varied, aren't they? Is it we just match you up with someone because they've got years of experience, or do we intentionally take the time to look for a perfect match so that we can get that return on investment to say we are helping to increase that value of each position? And, there are so many different pieces to think about in that mentorship puzzle, right? Calendaring, people's time, what content do we want to talk about? Those are certainly really key pieces. That second question in there, how could it be improved? Many times mentorship programs and coaching, we use that term synonymously sometimes, don't take into effect matching that mentor and mentee together to be sensitive to diversity and equity issues, inclusivity. What better way can we be inclusive than to really match mentors and mentees together for an outcome? So I think those are I guess those are several pieces to think about when we answer that second part of that question, which is how could it be improved?
Can I ask a question on the mentorship piece? Because I know there's a lot of variety in the size of weatherization agencies. Some of them are very small and some of them are very large. And I'm just curious if anyone on the line has tried something like this at either a large, because I've experienced this at a large organization where it was very helpful to have people that were sort of assigned to work with you, especially as a new employee, to navigate a very big organization. But I'm curious how that might work in smaller organizations that have, say, 25 or fewer employees or something.
I think for me, it's at varying sizes of organizations. There's been different types of opportunities for mentorship. And I think would have to look at, like, are we talking about a formal mentoring program or like I feel like I have a personal responsibility to mentor others at different stages of their career than where I might be, or different stages in a particular job role. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that we can bring mentorship into our organizations, and model what that could look like in different ways, whether that's a formal program in a larger organization that has that kind of structure in place, or something that might be more informal or not as, scripted as a larger organization. And I guess in weatherization, like some of it for me would be like, is it technical mentoring, for folks at field roles, or is it, kind of more of the onboarding feeling of culture, like organizational culture development? What would the goals be?
Can I please, I encourage other people on this call to hop in and give their, I'm just, this makes me think of a lot of things. So another question I have for anyone on the line, because I've heard this come up maybe at like conferences before, this question of like, if mentoring is hard to do at an organizational level, just because there are a lot of small agencies, like, would there be value in like the weatherization assistance program nationally has a mentor program where like you might be a crew lead or something in Oklahoma, but you're willing to mentor someone and you can use TNTA funds or whatever, however that works to do it, and you have the capacity to do it, right? And so like you're assigned a new installer that is brought on board in California or something like this, and you meet, every month virtually for that. I don't know. I'm curious people's reactions if that feels like it would be of value versus having it happen in-house at your own agency.
Well, I'll just share as somebody as a smaller agency, capacity would definitely be an issue for us. I mean, we're lucky if we can actually just get a full crew together for the day, and then bringing them in and having them do extra things. And I think when you talk about mentorship, we do have people that have been here for quite some time, but I don't know that they think of themselves as a mentor or understand what actual mentoring would mean versus just simply training or telling them this is how you do it. So yeah, as a smaller organization, I think true mentorship is difficult.
I think that kind of goes back like to Pagan's point about, in large organizations, mentorship, like a very formal type of mentorship might make sense. And then in other organizations, like my organization prior to NCAP, a few organizations ago, we had like tools and resources for folks to learn more about mentorship, right? So that they could access that information and then use it within their jobs. But there was no like formal mentorship program, but we resourced people so that they could step into those roles kind of informally and as needed. So appreciate that. I see Susan has her hand up.
Yes, hi, I'm Susan Cervantes. I'm with ALSA in north of Detroit. But right now I'm in sunny Florida at 78 degrees. So yay. But our state has been really helpful to us lately. We had a cohort of guys. We had 5 trained at the same time for 10 weeks. So we went through this very comprehensive training for EA, and then they've been down, the state people have been down several times to go on walkthroughs with them, to go over, like next week we have a comprehensive testing period for 3 days, and then they're going to take the BPI testing, and this is all through our state MyTech org. So it's been very, very helpful to us because most of the people that were trained have retired.
And just to follow up on that, Susan, do you feel like that cohort, because I assume they're working they're maybe working all over the state. Is that how, like, do you feel like they are sort of being able to mentor each other? Like they have a bond, yeah,
Well,
from starting
are
at the
you,
same
are
time?
you, are you talking about the EAs or the state people? The EAs?
The EAs, yeah.
The EAs are just for my organization. We're a very large area to cover. And so they're just for my organization. But I just had a contractor orientation, and I think there's about 7 who have BPI certifications and stuff that would like to join us. And so we might have another cohort that may be a combination of internal employees and contracted EAs so that they can help the network.
That's awesome, Susan. Thank you. Andrea, do you want to go? I think we're going to give it just a couple more minutes and then we want to wrap up, but go ahead.
Sure. I was going to say that at our weatherization conference that we did just this last fall, we held a crew member roundtable, and it was facilitated, you know, by the group elders, right? Folks that have been around for a long time. And it was awesome. There was so much engagement, and people were asking, you know, really good questions and almost like staffing different cases together and those sorts of things. So that's something that I would consider a form of mentorship. We're going to do that at our next upcoming conference as well. One of the other things that we've talked a lot about doing and have done, especially in our Fargo agency, is really plucking folks from the field and asking them to come with us to conferences and to help do presentations. And like the weatherization conference, great example, like we're really committed to lifting those folks that have a lot to offer, and they are going to be the future of the program because our group elders are going to be retiring, you know, in mass exodus, quite frankly. So those are just little snippets of things that we've had good luck with. Not a perfect solution, but things that have helped.
That's awesome. I feel like I want to steal 1 minute of, I don't know, Amy, if you want to talk at all about the emerging leaders thing that NCAP is doing. And I don't know if you want to take a minute because I feel like that's relevant to what Andrea was describing.
I certainly can. That's a great idea. We're in the middle of soft launching it, so you are the second group of people to hear about this. We're going to launch it formally in April, but we are funded through NREL to conduct a weatherization leadership development community of practice. So there's going to be about 20 to 25 people. There will be 3 cohorts. Our pilot year will be 2024 to 2025. Christopher Small, who's with us today, is our new hire. He'll be leading on that particular effort. And we will begin crafting the application and publishing the application soon. And what I have currently is an interest list, which is a spreadsheet. And so if you would like to tell me in the chat right now, I can add you to the interest list. So when we get started, I'll email the folks that know about it in advance and let them know that the application is open. And so we're going to be looking for 20 to 25 people from around the country. There probably won't be enough slots for everybody. The selection criteria will be around geographic diversity, work experience diversity, and all the other aspects of, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're very excited about it. It's going to bring together some of the expertise that you've heard on this call with some of our weatherization technical experts. So we'll have subject matter experts from the network talking about how best to blend community action leadership and management principles with weatherization specific leadership and management principles. So very excited.
Yep. And this is like MLTC at NCAP, right, is for like leaders. And so this is for, again, if you can identify those low to mid-level folks at your organization that you really want to support in their leadership growth, that you see them as potential future leaders, this is your place. And so we are.
And it fits in with today's conversation because it's really about retention, right? So we know that our weatherization staff often get poached. They leave to go somewhere else. And so we want to make sure in terms of succession planning that we pull our staff up within the organization and don't lose them.
Yep. Okay, we're going to segue to Mary Beth. We've again run out of time at the end of our session, but that's okay. She is going to bring us home strong.
Yeah, well, this is just the perfect point, is that, you know, everyone who works for your organization, y'all, is going to leave at some point, right? People are going to leave happily. Some people will not leave happily. But ultimately, we have to plan that there will be change. And so, one of the things that we can do is to think proactively about that change and use a leadership development cycle, an intentional process to make a commitment to developing our own, assessing our present work needs and the people needs, assessing the future work and people needs, because who our organizations are today might not be how they need to be tomorrow. And then establishing processes where we have intentional leadership development, and where we're identifying and developing that talent. So really, this fits well with succession planning. It's about developing that strategy for filling those key roles on maybe a short or a long-term basis. I think so often we've heard succession planning in terms of the executive director or CEO. And while that is critically important, we need to be thinking beyond that, right? Because a lot of the positions that we have beyond the ED are critical for us to be able to do our work. And so in succession planning, you really need to start with an intentional assessment of what are the skill sets that reside in the different positions within our organization? What kind of skill sets do we need in those roles? And then looking intentionally at our organization and looking at the positions, right? And figuring out which are at risk of turnover. You know, some folks might have a departure horizon. We might know that folks are preparing to retire, and that gives us runway to be able to be prepared for when that departure happens. And then also looking intentionally at internal capacity. Do we have folks who could be ready to step into those roles? And if we don't, can we do something to build and grow and prepare for that? And so, you know, this is an example from a resource from NCAP, where you can look at different roles within your organization and identify who might be some candidates to fill those roles based on our understanding of what is needed to be successful, right? And then think about how long would it take for them to get ready, and what would I have to do to get them ready? Do they need to go to the emerging leader cohort? Do I need to start, you know, to Andrea's point, start taking them to different conferences? Do I need to be connecting them to the state cohort of leaders? So this is a really intentional, systematic process to go through in your succession planning process. So, you know, this is something that you can do in your organizations, but broadly think on your, you know, reflect on your team, pull out that org chart and look at the positions. What are the unique skill sets that are essential to your team fulfilling its purpose, right? To fulfilling its mission, to doing the work it has to do. Look at which of our positions are at high risk of turnover, either because they're low paid positions and we know from history that those positions turn over, or, you know, they get poached or whatever that may be, or because of those departure horizons that we're aware of. And then thinking intentionally about what positions and skill sets do you need to be intentionally growing, not only to mitigate the risk today, right, but to be ready for the future, to think about the program 3-6 years down the road. So Pagan, I see your point in the chat. Do you want to add anything on that?
No, I was just pointing out like how integrated all of this is as you're talking about, you know, succession planning. Well, that's really like workforce development planning and thinking about your workforce pipeline. And are you targeting, you know, your pipeline areas and community engagement activities in the right places to meet, you know, yeah, it's just it's a big spider web of integration.
Yeah, and I want to add that weatherization in a lot of ways has a leg up in this space because you have such great career clear career pathways that you can kind of tap for, okay, this is what we have to do to get someone ready, and here's how we can intentionally connect them and show them the pathway forward. So leverage those resources in your work. And just a few closing points here about succession planning and all of this interconnected web. It's that development is a retention strategy. When employees participate in learning and development opportunities, a lot of them feel more motivated, they feel more empowered, and they feel more equipped to do their job. And when people feel these things, they're more likely to stay with your organization. And so, developing capacity, we're talking about formal mentorship, we're talking about formal leadership development, but there are other ways that also don't cost you a dime to begin to build the capacity of your bench. You could give stretch assignments, right? What work is happening in your organization that you could start assigning to people to help them grow their capacity and grow into that future position? Using coaching, a coaching model in your supervision and in your support of staff can be incredibly helpful. Using kind of 360 feedback, even doing job rotation, right? Where you have capacity, to do some level of cross training and internal education. These are all things that you could do to be getting ready now for those for when those positions will turn over. So lots of different ideas. You all probably have a lot more to add, but this is just kind of a starting point for how you can develop capacity. And one last point here is about, formalizing it. Using an individual development plan takes the things that you might know, sometimes leadership knows exactly what the pathway is, and it's not apparent to staff, right? So use that individual development plan as a two-way communication tool to help set out, okay, here are your goals, here's the organization's goals, and here's what we're going to do to help you get ready for that future state. And so I want to close out by pointing out that, again, this is all part of that employee life cycle, right? That we've attracted, we've recruited, we've onboarded, we've retained folks, we're going to develop them. And that there is there's an internal cycle here, right? That, when you develop folks, you can then recruit them to do more different positions within your organization. Sometimes folks are going to offboard, and when we can help people offboard successfully, that information can be crucial to helping us know what makes a good hire, which feeds back into your recruitment. And offboarding happy leavers, that's a great way to attract new employees, right? When people leave on a happy note, they're willing to recommend to folks, hey, yeah, that's a great place to work. It wasn't, I got a better position, or I whatever, but happy leavers are, again, a great promotion opportunity for your organization. So, I think I shared this last time, all of these pieces are connected. All of this work is an art, and there's no perfect recipe. And ultimately, hiring and leading people is tough. Tap your peers and your partners for support. We hope that your time together here today and over the last 2 weeks and over the last 2 webinars and in the broader engagement has given you some more names for your Rolodex if you still use one of those, and some more friends to call when things get tough. And so, or when you just want some great ideas from your friends and peers. And so, we want to say thank you. We hope that you'll add our names to your, again, Rolodex if you use such a thing. And if you don't know what one is, please don't talk to me because I feel old. We do have a number of resources for you. There were a number within the presentation itself. NCAP does have 2 specific succession planning resources. I will share that they are a little focused on executive directors, but a lot of the tools and practices are still relevant for kind of that larger workforce planning. And there are a number of other tools specific for the WAP network that I'm going to turn back to Allison to just kind of name and to wrap us up.
Yeah, so these are just the main pages for all the partners that you heard from today. And so what we'll do is after either later today or tomorrow, I will send an email to everyone that joined today with the slides so that you have all, we put some of the links in the chat, but so that you have all of the links to all of these great resources. I know, you know, it was a lot of information last month. It was a lot of information today, and I know a number of you joined partway through and missed some of it. So please go through. I'll probably include a survey in the follow-up email as well, because if there are topics that you specifically want more information on, or you think just one thing that we're all looking for is like, are there more resources that don't exist? There are a lot of resources, and part of the work of what we're doing is just making sure people know how to find them and know that they exist. But if there was something that came up today about mentorship or about whatever it is that like you would love either one-on-one support, because we can do that through this technical assistance offering, or, you know, or you think like it would be great if I could have a checklist to do X, Y, whatever it is. Please let us know. That helps us. Otherwise, we don't know that we can create that. And so if anyone wants to stick around for a couple minutes, I can stay on if people have questions, but otherwise, thank you all so much for listening in and participating. And we hope you got something out of it and that you can take something and continue moving forward with the work that your organizations all need.